This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. Presidents, first ladies, and many others who knew Barbara Bush are remembering her today. She died Tuesday at the age of 92. President Donald Trump said among Mrs. Bush's greatest achievements, quote, was recognizing the importance of literacy as a fundamental family value that requires nurturing and protection. Jennifer Wishon has a look back at her life and legacy.
Barbara Bush, America's grandmother, the matriarch of the Bush political dynasty, and just the second lady in history to be both wife and mother to U.S. presidents. A no-nonsense woman known for her pearl necklaces, quick wit, and fierce love of family. Her husband's silver fox.
I think I have had the luckiest life in the world. But I think to have someone like George Bush to share it with makes it considerably easier.
In this 1992 interview with CBN's Terry Meeuwsen, Bush explained what was special about her family growing up.
We sat as a family around a table 3 times a day. I think that's something people can try very hard to do.
Born Barbara Pierce on June 8, 1925, she grew up in a suburb of New York City. She was 16 when she met her future husband at a dance. The couple had 6 children and together endured the death of their daughter Robin, who lost her battle with leukemia when just 3 years old.
And of course, I have great belief in God, and so does George Bush, so that helps a lot.
Bush was a fixture in Washington for more than a decade, serving as second lady while the Reagans occupied the White House before moving in herself. As First Lady, she focused on improving literacy among parents and children, believing better literacy can solve many of society's problems. In a note to her alma mater, Smith College, shortly before she died, Bush wrote, "I am still old and still in love." She was a popular First Lady and celebrated by many at the end for choosing comfort care that allowed her to enjoy her final days with her family. In her 700 Club interview, she encouraged young couples to make family their top priority.
I think it's nice to pray together. I think it's nice to tell your children you love them. And I confess I did not grow up where we said that to each other. We were rather stuffy, I think. But now I have no qualms about telling people I love them.
She will be missed. Well, here's a look at some of the other big headlines we're following in the CBN newsroom today. A Southwest airplane carrying 149 passengers exploded in mid-air Tuesday. One person was killed, another was nearly sucked out of a shattered window. The plane was bound to Dallas from New York, but they made an emergency landing in Philadelphia. Starbucks will close more than 8,000 stores next month to conduct racial bias training. The news comes after 2 black men were arrested in a Philadelphia store last week. Starbucks CEO says he wants to make sure that situation does not happen again. Nearly 175,000 employees will take part in the training. The Supreme Court struck down part of a federal immigration law that makes it easier to deport immigrants who have been convicted of crimes. In a 5-4 vote, President Trump's nominee, Neil Gorsuch, sided with liberal justices. He says part of the law was too vague. Trump is now calling on Congress to step in and close immigration loopholes. And you can find these and other stories at cbnnews.com. Breaking news indicates that change may be coming soon to the Korean Peninsula. New reports confirm that CIA Director Mike Pompeo recently met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in preparation for his summit with President Trump. Also, the North Korean leader is set to meet with South Korea's president in the next several weeks. Heather Sells has that story.
After years of conducting nuclear tests that have escalated tensions with the world, North Korea appears to be trying a different approach. The latest news, CIA Director Mike Pompeo traveled to North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un over Easter weekend, just after President Trump nominated him to become Secretary of State. The president has been meeting with Japan's Prime Minister at his Florida estate, where he referenced the Pompeo trip.
We've had talks at the highest level. Well, let's leave it a little bit short of that. But we have had talks at the highest level. And it's going very well, but we'll see what happens.
President Trump also indicated that an upcoming meeting between the North Korean leader and the South Korean president has his, quote, blessing, while adding that the countries believe he deserves credit as well.
They've been very generous, that without us and without me in particular, I guess, you would have to say that they wouldn't be discussing anything.
The president says that the U.S. and Japan are unified on the subject of North Korea. Since the Korean War, North Korea's nuclear weapons and its ability to deliver them long range has threatened not only its neighbors but the U.S. In addition to its nuclear program, North Korea's human rights abuses are also an international concern, and the global church has long been aware of the suffering of believers there. North Koreans who follow Christ or speak out against the government are routinely tortured, killed, or sent to harsh labor camps.
The notion that hundreds of thousands of people can exist without almost any rights in some of the worst circumstances that we've documented in the last 50 years is simply intolerable.
President Trump says he'll meet with Kim Jong-un by early June. He says 5 locations are being considered for the meeting, but regardless of where it's held, the stakes, as the world watches and hopes, couldn't be higher. Heather Sells, CBN News.
China's threat of tariffs on farm products in retaliation to the president's tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum has some farmers feeling uneasy as they prepare for the growing season. But Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue tells Jennifer Wishon he's working on a plan to bail them out if China follows through.
After college, Brett Whiteman returned to his family farm in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. He raises beef cattle, corn, and soybeans, and says it's always alarming when agriculture products are mentioned in trade disputes.
Soybeans are the most concerning just because of the volume of consumption that China has. They are the largest consumer of soybeans in the world, and we are the largest producer of soybeans in the world.
China is threatening tariffs as high as 25% on more than 100 American products, including everything Whiteman raises, along with wheat, cotton, and cranberries. The threat of tariffs and fears of a trade war come at a critical time for farmers as they prepare to plant their crops and add a layer of uncertainty to an industry that, let's face it, could really do without it.
Commodity prices have dropped by over 40%. Net farm incomes have dropped by 50%.
U.S. agriculture depends on trade, which accounts for 20% of farm profits. Of the $140 billion in agriculture exports last year, China was America's biggest customer. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue tells CBN News China's tariff threats are a big deal, but says farmers he's talked to appreciate the president's willingness to stand up for them.
They're patriots. They understand China had to be called on for cheating and called out. They understand they're vulnerable, but they also believe the president's going to take care of them.
President Trump has authorized Perdue to use all the powers at his disposal to come up with a package to help farmers if China's threats affect their bottom lines.
We're working on a package, and there are authorities here within the Secretary of USDA in order to utilize programs and funds that would support farmers if they are harmed and damaged by trade disputes.
Beijing already signaled it's willing to deal when officials reduced tariffs on imported cars and improved protections of intellectual property. Secretary Perdue is hopeful his aid package will never have to be opened.
They'd much rather have a fair price for a good crop than any type of government payments.
Whiteman also sells crop insurance to farmers in Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland. And among them, he says, there's one unifying principle.
We are in favor of free trade. The American producer is incredibly good at producing corn and soybeans. And if there's demand out there, we typically meet and exceed it almost to our own demise. So we want to keep that demand up and eliminate anything that might inhibit our products from going anywhere in the world where people might need them.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Mount Jackson, Virginia.
Americans are getting an extra day to file their taxes after the IRS website crashed on deadline day. The crash also caused problems for popular third-party tax preparers such as TurboTax and H&R Block. The IRS says that everyone now has until midnight tonight to complete their tasks. No additional paperwork is needed for the extension. The agency did not say how many people were affected by that outage. Coming up, ancient history through a modern lens. We'll show you the new photography project that reveals the biblical prophecy of Israel. Welcome back. Nearly 3,000 years ago, Hebrew prophets wrote of how the land of Israel would be transformed. Now a new book shows remarkable and even prophetic changes in the 70 years since Israel became a nation. Chris Mitchell explains from Jerusalem.
150 years ago, famed author Mark Twain visited the Holy Land and wrote, "It was a desolate country and a silent and mournful expanse."
He talks about up in the Jezreel Valley, he talks about how that you can travel in 10 miles in any direction and not see a single person. And so one of the towns that we did some photography was of a small town of Afula, which is really off the map as far as many Westerners are concerned, but it was established in the early 1900s. So 50, 60 years after Mark Twain, there's a small Jewish settlement. Today it's a booming Israeli city that we've been able to match some side-by-side perfect photography with it.
Doug Hershey and his team chose 200 photographs of Israel from the 1880s to the 1940s. In his new book, Israel Rising, The Land of Israel Reawakens, Hershey chronicles the changes from that time span until today.
That's been part of the joy. I mean, we have these old photos of Tel Aviv of less than 100 years ago of shacks on sand dunes with camel caravans on the beach, and to compare it from the exact same angle today, it's just stunning.
The book follows Ezekiel's promise, where in chapter 36, verse 8, the prophet declared, "But you, O mountains of Israel, you shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people Israel, for they are about to come."
We think of prophecy being to kings or to people or nations, but he's prophesying to the land that when Israel returns as a nation, branches will put forth fruit, waste cities will be rebuilt, the people and beasts will be multiplied on the land will be cultivated and sown.
These side-by-side photos show the transformations. Here's Jerusalem near the King David Hotel in the 1930s, and the same view today. This is the Hebrew University campus in 1925, and what it looks like now. From the north in Haifa to the south in Beersheba, Hershey says the pictures represent the prophet's words coming alive.
We're living in a really profound time in history. We're living in a time where 2,700-year-old prophecies from Isaiah and Ezekiel and Jeremiah, they've been lying dormant for about that long, and many of them are coming to pass. The most repeated promise through the scriptures is that God will bring his people back to the land, and when they do, there's going to be these dramatic changes, and we're seeing those.
Hershey says the land itself seemed to be waiting for its ancient people to return.
To me, it's one of the most profound things here, is this land has been conquered 15, 20 different times. It never becomes a homeland for any other people group, and the land would never produce for any other people group. And Israel moves back in, and suddenly the vast desert wastelands are now producing flowers, they're producing fruit. Isaiah 27 talks about how that when Israel returns, Jacob will take root and fill the earth with fruit. And for many centuries, believers would read that and look at that as allegorical or spiritual, and we're finding today it's very literal. It's happening right now.
Hershey says the book provides a visual opportunity for those who have never visited Israel, and it's also struck a chord with the younger generations.
Most millennials are ready for something real. They want to see something practical. It's as far as much of perhaps theological Christianity that they've been raised on, more ideas. They're ready for something solid. They're ready for something real. And so even now when I speak in the States, sometimes I'll have questions about theology or the questions about the land, and usually my answer revolves around, let me show you. Come with me to Israel, I'll show you myself.
As Israel celebrates its 70th anniversary, Hershey sees Israel as a miracle.
Absolutely. I mean, Israel is the time clock, as many people have heard and have said, and I believe that as well. I mean, there's so much that is happening here in a very short amount of time. To me, it's one of the most profound miracles of our day.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Still ahead, Christians across America are packing in the pews and also packing on the pounds. See what's being done to help the faithful shed the fat. It's well known that most church functions feature food, and statistics show obesity is particularly rampant among churchgoers. The news isn't all bad, however. Lori Johnson tells us about a program designed to help churches spread the good news without expanding waistlines.
Overall, the church does a pretty good job avoiding unhealthy things like smoking, alcohol, drugs, and promiscuity, but misses the mark when it comes to obesity. Research shows people who begin attending church in their 20s are more likely to become obese by middle age than those who don't go to church. This especially troubled doctor and Christian Daniel Amen.
I actually prayed about it because I went to my own church and saw them serving hot dogs, donuts, ice cream, bacon, sausage. And I'm like, they're giving you all this food to kill you early. Save them, then kill them.
He feels it's high time the church deals with its weight problem.
You know, it's just not okay when your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit for churches to basically poison you with low-quality food and think, well, that's what we've always done, so it's okay.
As a brain imaging specialist, Dr. Amen published 2 studies showing as weight increases, the brain actually shrinks. It's widely known that obesity lowers quality of life, adds millions to healthcare costs, and can lead to an early grave. Nationwide, the South leads the pack.
And that's also where there are more evangelical Christian churches. And I'm not okay with that. You know, the Bible Belt widening.
With that in mind, Dr. Amen co-developed a church-based weight loss program known as the Daniel Plan. While the classes last 6 weeks, the diet is intended as a lifelong discipline.
I feel so good now. You know, I swim a mile a day. I was in a wheelchair at one time. I couldn't keep my balance, but now look at me.
75-year-old Phyllis Neal joined the Daniel Plan at her Yorktown, Virginia church. She suffered from pain, depression, and couldn't sleep due to a number of health issues.
Vicodin and Ambien and Prozac, and I was just on so much stuff.
Phyllis ultimately lost 65 pounds, stopped taking medications, felt happy, and began sleeping like a baby. She attributes much of her success to the faith element of the plan.
And God just took control. And He has just blessed my life so much.
Her 75-year-old husband, Dennis, got on board too.
I lost 65 pounds just by eating God's food.
Dennis and Phyllis believe so much in the program that they now teach others.
One of the things I tell people in our classes is if God came down today and said, look, I want you to do this task for me, and then you tell him that you're not physically fit to do it because you're overweight, that doesn't work.
The Neals emphasize the importance of breaking free from processed foods because of ingredients like MSG, industrialized oils, and high fructose corn syrup.
Diabetes, cancer, all of it's related to sugar. And we got to get that out of our system. We've been hijacked by the food industry.
Instead of packaged items, Phyllis fills their kitchen with natural whole foods, free of chemicals and sweeteners. Chicken strips, cut up vegetables, boiled eggs, beans, cheese, and nuts.
You'll see that I keep fruit available. My grandchildren come in the house. They don't ask for candy here. They go over and get a piece of fruit, and their parents are so happy for them.
Drinking plenty of water helps us manage our weight because, believe it or not, sometimes our brain tricks us into thinking we're hungry when we're actually just thirsty. People adhering to the Daniel Plan exercise regularly and attend support group meetings. So while obesity continues to plague the church, Christians nationwide are shedding millions of pounds thanks to the Daniel Plan, named after the Bible hero whose diet reflected his commitment to God. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Great to see that so many people across the country are shedding the pounds and that there's a spiritual component to it as well. We'll be right back with more of CBN NewsWatch. CBN's Orphans Promise is giving children in Costa Rica access to medical and dental care. Volunteers from Orphans Promise recently visited the hard-to-reach region of Cabagra. They provided teeth cleanings and physical checkups for more than 100 children. The kids were also able to have some fun with face painting, games, and a viewing of Superbook. Thanks to the event, 24 children gave their lives to Christ. That's awesome. Well, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care about most at cbnnews.com and tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.